A millionaire was about to lose billions just because he didn't speak German, until a poor waitress showed up and did the impossible. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, which city are you watching from? And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story, everyone. What do you mean he's not coming? Nicholas Sterling's voice echoed through the dining room, deep and sharp, making some customers glance over curiously. Do you realize what you're telling me, Andrew? Without a translator, we're doomed. Sitting at the most private table in the restaurant, Nicholas was gripping the napkin between his fingers as if he might tear the expensive fabric apart. His expression, usually unreadable, was now pure nervousness. Across from him, his assistant Andrew trembled, still holding his phone. He said something came up, Mr. Nicholas. Andrew stammered. Personal issue, he won't make it. I tried to insist, but nothing. Nicholas cut him off, slamming his hand on the table. Klaus is German, Andrew. The whole contract is in German. Can you read German? I can't. Andrew took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but his forehead was already shining with sweat. Sir, maybe we could improvise. A translation app, maybe. A translation app? You think I'm going to risk $1 billion deal with a phone app? Nicholas leaned over the table, eyes blazing. I'm about to lose billions, Andrew. Billions. Do you even understand how big this is? The words hung in the air like sharp knives. All around, the luxurious dining room had turned into a stage of quiet tension. Discreet glances were exchanged. A millionaire about to explode wasn't something you saw every day. That's when Sarah approached. Tray in hand, light steps, but sharp eyes. She had already picked up on the heated tone between the two men during her earlier visits to the table. Now, as she poured more wine into Nicholas's glass, she clearly caught the words German and billions in the air. She glanced at the two of them, a nearly collapsing assistant and a tycoon on the verge of a meltdown. A spark of boldness flashed in her eyes. Having language issues? She asked, as if making a casual remark. Nicholas turned sharply toward her, annoyed by the interruption. Yes, but it's nothing you can fix. Sarah tilted her head slightly, her discreet smile hiding her curiosity. What language do you need exactly? Nicholas huffed, impatient. German, but don't bother asking, you wouldn't understand. Sarah's smile widened, this time with a hint of challenge. Just because I'm a waitress doesn't mean I don't know languages, Mr. Sterling. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Her words seemed to cut through the air like an arrow. Andrew's eyes widened in disbelief. A few heads turned to watch. Nicholas frowned, staring at Sarah like she had just suggested something insane. You speak German? He asked, still doubtful. Fluently, Sarah replied casually, swirling the wine bottle without any rush. Along with French and Italian, in case you need those too. Andrew let out a nervous, almost mocking laugh. You've got to be kidding. Sarah raised her eyebrows and looked Nicholas straight in the eye. It's not a joke. I'm offering the only real solution you have right now. Do you want it or not? Nicholas hesitated for a second, sizing her up. That kind of confidence wasn't something he saw often. And before he could answer, the restaurant doors opened. Herr Klaus, tall and imposing, walked in with two advisors. The clock showed it was time for dinner. Time was up. Nicholas looked at Sarah, a flash of decision in his eyes. All right, have a seat. And Sarah, still in her waitress uniform, pulled out a chair and sat at the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. The entire restaurant followed her with stunned eyes. Dinner began. Herr Klaus greeted Nicholas politely, and Sarah, with a professional smile, translated every word in flawless German. Klaus raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised. Assistant Andrew said nothing, just watched. And slowly, Nicholas's panic began to shift into quiet relief. She guided the conversation like she'd been doing it her whole life. Within minutes, the two men were laughing, and Nicholas, still in disbelief, saw the deal moving forward. Half an hour later, Herr Klaus shook his hand, satisfied. The deal was done. Billions were saved. At that moment, Sarah caught a subtle signal from the restaurant manager, who was watching from a distance with a stern face. She politely excused herself from the table, but before she could leave, the manager quickly approached, his face red with indignation. How dare you sit at the client's table, Sarah? His voice was loud, drawing attention. You're a waitress. Just a waitress. Do you realize the scandal you're causing? You're fired. And Mr. Sterling, I apologize for this inconvenience, the manager added. Sarah opened her mouth to try and explain, but he didn't let her. Go back to the kitchen, get your things, and leave. She stayed quiet, holding back the urge to respond. But her eyes, still steady, turned to Nicholas. He had witnessed the whole scene. His expression hardened. Nicholas stood up, the air around him growing heavy. She's not going anywhere, he said, his voice low but sharp, and you're going to hear what I have to say before you open your mouth again. The entire restaurant froze. Everyone was now watching them. And Sarah, still unsure of what was coming next, felt her heart race. Nicholas Sterling stepped forward, his presence taking over the room. The manager, who just seconds ago had been shouting with authority, now seemed to shrink in front of the millionaire. Let me get this straight, Nicholas began, his voice dangerously calm. You're firing the person who just saved a multi-billion-dollar deal because she had the nerve to sit down? The manager swallowed hard, trying to keep some composure. Mr. Sterling, there are protocols, hierarchies that need to be respected. Protocols? Nicholas let out a dry laugh. You know which protocol I respect? Competence. And this woman, he pointed to Sarah, has more competence in her little finger than half the executives I know. Sarah watched the scene, switching between surprise and an almost uncontrollable urge to laugh. Seeing her ex-boss being torn apart by Nicholas Sterling was better than any revenge she could have imagined. Besides, Nicholas went on, now circling the manager like a shark, you publicly humiliated someone who was helping my business. Do you know what that says about your establishment? That you don't recognize talent when it's pouring wine right in front of you. The manager's face turned several shades of red. Some nearby customers watched in fascination, as if they were witnessing a live theater performance. I apologize, Mr. Sterling. Maybe I acted too quickly. Too quickly? Nicholas shook his head. You were incompetent. And do you know what I'm going to do now? The manager grew even paler, probably imagining harsh online reviews and losing wealthy clients. Nicholas turned to Sarah, who was still holding the empty tray, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, Sarah, I want you to come work for me. I need someone like you. Be my official translator and personal assistant. The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew nearly dropped his phone. Herr Klaus, still sitting at his table, raised his eyebrows with interest. The manager looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Sarah blinked several times, processing the words. Then, with the same ease she used when serving wine, she replied, Are you out of your mind? I just lost my job because of you. Nicholas didn't flinch. No, you got a better job, with a salary that makes this place, he gestured vaguely toward the restaurant, look like tip money. Oh, so now you think you can just snap your fingers and I'll come running? Sarah crossed her arms, completely ignoring the fact that she was arguing with a billionaire in front of dozens of people. I'm not snapping fingers, Nicholas replied, nay, a hint of amusement in his voice. I'm making a professional offer. You proved yourself exceptional. I hire exceptional people. Sarah looked at the manager, who seemed on the verge of fainting, then back at Nicholas, who had that serious expression with a defiant spark in his eyes. Are you serious? She asked. Completely serious. You saved my business today. I want you on my team. Sarah bit her lip, clearly fighting a smile. Then, with a mischievous look that made the manager take a step back, she said out loud, Well, since I've already been fired, I'll accept, but on my terms. Nicholas tilted his head, intrigued. I'm listening. First, let's get out of here. It's getting awkward watching my ex-boss about to cry. Without waiting for an answer, Sarah took off her apron, tossed it on a nearby chair, and walked toward the exit. Nicholas, genuinely surprised by her boldness, followed after leaving a generous amount of cash on the table and nodding to Herr Klaus. Outside, the fresh New York night air greeted them. Sarah took a deep breath as if she could finally relax. So, Nicholas began, about those terms. Oh yes. Sarah turned to him, counting on her fingers. First, no coffee runs. If you want coffee, there's a machine in the office, or you can ask another assistant. Nicholas raised an eyebrow but nodded. Second, full freedom to speak my mind. If I think you're making a mistake, I'll say it. Interesting, he murmured. Third, never ever, under any circumstance, call me just an assistant. Either you accept that I'm a qualified professional, or you look for someone else. Anything else? Nicholas asked, clearly amused. That's all for now, but I reserve the right to add more rules if necessary. Nicholas extended his hand. We have a deal, Sarah. Thompson, she finished, shaking his hand firmly. Sarah Thompson. Welcome to Sterling Enterprises, Miss Thompson. Monday, 8 a.m. The address is on the card. He handed her an elegant business card. Sarah looked over the card, then looked at him. You do know I have no idea what a real personal assistant actually does, right? You pulled off a billion-dollar business dinner. I'm sure you'll manage. Yeah, I do have that special talent for getting into trouble, she said, putting the card away. See you Monday, boss. Nicholas, he corrected. In the office, it's Mr. Sterling, but between us, Nicholas is fine. Sarah waved as she walked away. Fine, Nicholas. I just hope your other employees are less dramatic than my ex-manager. As she disappeared into the crowd of pedestrians, Nicholas remained on the sidewalk, a reluctant smile on his face. Andrew, who had finally stepped out of the restaurant, approached cautiously. Sir, are you sure about this? Hiring a waitress as your personal assistant? Nicholas looked toward the direction Sarah had gone. Andrew, that woman speaks 3 languages fluently, saved a billion-dollar deal, and had the guts to stand up to me. Do you know many MBAs who would do that? Andrew didn't answer. Yeah, me neither. Nicholas concluded. Monday's going to be interesting. When Sarah arrived at her apartment in Brooklyn, she dropped onto the couch and stared at the business card on her nightstand. Sterling Enterprises, she read aloud. What did I just get myself into? She stood and went to her closet. Her clothes were simple, nothing that matched Manhattan's corporate world. She sighed. She'd have to improvise, as always. Monday came faster than expected. At 7:45 a.m., Sarah stood in front of the towering glass and steel building in the heart of Manhattan. She wore her best outfit, a pair of black pants she'd bought on sale and a white blouse she hoped looked professional enough. This is it, she whispered to herself, squaring her shoulders. The automatic doors opened, revealing a lobby that looked like something out of a movie. Marble everywhere, a chandelier that probably cost more than her annual rent, and people in suits that looked straight out of a fashion magazine. Sarah swallowed hard. This definitely wasn't going to be easy, and she was about to find out that working for a demanding millionaire would be far more complicated than serving wine at an upscale restaurant. Sarah walked across the marble lobby trying to appear confident, but her cheap shoes echoed awkwardly against the polished floor. At the reception desk, 2 impeccably dressed women watched her approach, exchanging knowing glances. Good morning, I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm starting today as Mr. Sterling's assistant, she announced, trying to ignore the whispers. The blonde receptionist typed quickly, frowned, then typed again. Thompson. Oh, here it is. Personal assistant. Her tone made it clear she was surprised. That's right, Sarah confirmed, keeping her smile steady. 42nd floor, executive elevator on the right. The receptionist pointed, still giving Sarah a head-to-toe evaluation. While she waited for the elevator, Sarah overheard fragments of conversation behind her. Sterling's personal assistant? Must be a mistake. Look at what she's wearing. Maybe she's related to someone? The elevator doors opened and Sarah stepped in, pressing the button harder than necessary. First day, and I'm already making friends, she muttered to herself. The 42nd floor was even more intimidating. Glass walls, sleek furniture, and an atmosphere that screamed power and money. Sarah barely had time to take it all in before a tall man in a flawless gray suit and perfectly styled hair approached her. You must be the waitress, he said, pronouncing the word like it left a bad taste. Former waitress, Sarah corrected. Now I'm a personal assistant, and you are. Richard Blackwood, Chief Operating Officer and Mr. Sterling's right-hand man for 5 years. He walked around her as if inspecting. Interesting choice of attire for a first day. Sarah looked down at her simple outfit, then at the suit that probably cost 3 months of her rent. It's my humble chic style, very trendy in Brooklyn. Richard didn't laugh. Come on, I'll introduce you to the rest of the team. He started walking, speaking over his shoulder. Everyone, listen up. This is Sarah Thompson, Mr. Sterling's, how should I say, last-minute translation hire. About a dozen faces turned to look at her. Sarah could practically feel the judgment in the air. Nice to meet you, she said, giving a small wave. I'm the waitress who saved billions, and you are. She paused dramatically. Oh, right, the people who needed a waitress to save billions. An awkward silence filled the room. Then someone at the back let out a muffled laugh. Another followed. Richard looked visibly annoyed. Very funny, he said flatly. Let's see how long that sense of humor lasts around here. Good morning, everyone. Nicholas Sterling's voice cut through the tension. He was standing at his office door watching the scene. I see you've all met Sarah. Yes, sir, Richard answered. I was just explaining the company protocols. I'm sure you were, Nicholas said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Sarah, my office. We need to go over your schedule. Sarah followed Nicholas, but not before winking at the group. Nice meeting you all. Can't wait to work with you. Nicholas's office was exactly what she expected. Huge, with a panoramic view of Manhattan and furniture that probably cost more than a car. Have a seat, he said, pointing to a chair. How are you feeling? Like a zebra in a stable full of racehorses, Sarah replied honestly. Nicholas almost smiled. Richard can be territorial. Don't take it personally. Territorial? He looked at me like I was a ketchup stain on a Monet painting. You have a unique way of describing things, Nicholas said, handing her a tablet. Here's your schedule. Meetings, appointments, everything you need to know. Sarah scrolled through the screen. Investor meeting, London branch conference, lunch with the board. She stopped. Wait, meeting with Japanese investors? Today at 3? Yes, last-minute opportunity. Very important. Sarah bit her lip. Nicholas, I have to be honest. He raised an eyebrow. My Japanese isn't as fluent as my German. I know some words, basic phrases, but a full business meeting. Nicholas's face grew serious. Are you saying you can't do it? I'm saying I'll have to get creative, Sarah replied. I can use some words I know and, well, Google Translate exists for a reason. Google Translate? In a business meeting? Look, I know it's not ideal, but with my basic knowledge and a bit of tech, I can make it work. I've handled worse. Nicholas studied her for a moment. You saved my German deal. I trust you. Thank you. Throughout the morning, Sarah moved through tasks, surprising some and annoying others. When a document in French came in, she translated it in minutes. When someone needed to talk to an Italian supplier on the phone, she handled it smoothly. She's like a linguistic Swiss Army knife, one of the secretaries said during lunch. More like a ticking time bomb, Richard muttered as he walked by. At 2 o'clock, Sarah was organizing the documents for the Japanese meeting when Richard showed up at her makeshift desk. You know, there are specific protocols for Japanese meetings, he said. Bows, business cards, hierarchy. Things a waitress probably wouldn't know. I know about bows. Sarah interrupted. 15 degrees for casual, 30 for respect, 45 for deep respect or apology. Business cards with both hands, receive and examine carefully before putting it away. Never in the back pocket. Richard blinked, surprised. I worked tables at a fancy restaurant, Richard. Had clients from all over the world. I picked up a few things. Before he could reply, Nicholas appeared. Sarah, I need you in the conference room. The Japanese guests arrived early. Sarah quickly grabbed her phone, already opening Google Translate. Discreetly, of course, she whispered to herself. Richard followed, clearly expecting a disaster. In the conference room, 3 Japanese executives were waiting. Sarah took a deep breath, gave a respectful bow, and said in basic Japanese, Welcome to Sterling Enterprises. It's an honor to have you here. The executives seemed pleasantly surprised. One of them answered quickly in Japanese. Sarah smiled, understanding only half of what was being said. Discreetly, she typed a few keywords into her phone under the table. They're thanking us for the warm welcome and mentioning something about a tech proposal? She translated to Nicholas. The meeting went on, with Sarah switching between her limited knowledge, contextual clues, and quiet phone searches. Surprisingly, it worked. The Japanese guests seemed more amused than offended by her obvious effort to communicate. Your Japanese is interesting, one of them said with a smile. Thank you. I'm still learning, but my Google Fu is excellent, Sarah replied, showing her phone. To everyone's surprise, the Japanese guests laughed. The ice was broken. An hour later, the meeting ended successfully. The investors left satisfied, leaving behind a preliminary proposal. I can't believe that actually worked, Richard muttered. I can, Nicholas said, watching Sarah put her phone away. She has a special talent for turning the impossible into possible. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah collapsed into her chair. Talent? I call it creative desperation. Call it whatever you want, Nicholas said. But it's working. Keep it up. As Nicholas headed back to his office, Richard walked up to Sarah. Don't think a few tricks will impress everyone around here, he said quietly. Sarah looked him straight in the eye. Richard, I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just trying to do my job. If that bothers you, maybe the problem isn't me. Richard walked away without replying, but Sarah could already tell this wouldn't be their last confrontation. First day, and I already made an enemy, she sighed. At least the Japanese liked me. She looked out the window at the city below. Working here wouldn't be easy, but since when did she choose the easy path? Later on, Sarah was organizing the meeting papers, satisfied with the unlikely outcome of her basic Japanese mixed with tech. Nicholas was chatting with Andrew near the window, clearly relieved that another deal was moving forward. I have to admit, Andrew said, glancing subtly at Sarah, she has a unique talent for getting out of impossible situations. Nicholas nodded, watching Sarah work. That's exactly why I hired her. Sometimes you need someone who thinks outside the box. Across the room, Richard kept a neutral expression, but his fingers were tapping impatiently on the table. Patricia, the secretary, approached him with a folder. The final documents for the Japanese proposal, Mr. Blackwood? They've already been reviewed by the legal team. Richard took the folder, flipping through it quickly. Great. I'll take one last look before we send it out. Sarah walked over to the main table where the preliminary contracts were. Years of waiting tables had taught her to pay attention to detail. One wrong order could ruin an entire evening. That habit was proving useful in the corporate world now. She picked up the first document, scanning the terms in both English and Japanese. Something caught her eye. Wait a second, she murmured, frowning. Is there a problem? Nicholas asked, coming closer. Sarah pointed to a clause. This percentage here, it says 30%, but I'm sure the Japanese mentioned 13% during the meeting. Must be a typo, Richard said quickly, appearing out of nowhere. I'll have it fixed. It's not just that, Sarah went on, turning the page. Here it says the delivery deadline is 18 months, but they specifically asked for 8 months. And this exclusivity clause, she paused, rereading. This would give them rights to all our technology, not just the specific project. Nicholas's face turned serious. He grabbed the document, reading it carefully. My God, she's right. If we had sent this, we would have lost the deal and probably ended up in a legal mess, Andrew added, pale. Sarah kept checking the other documents. Here's another one. The investment amount is missing a zero. It says 50 million instead of 500 million. How did this get past legal? Nicholas asked, his voice tight with restrained anger. Patricia looked horrified. I don't understand. I received these documents directly from the system, already approved. Sarah noticed something odd. In the corner of the page, there was a faint digital watermark, a timestamp showing when the document was last edited. These were changed, she did a quick calculation, 40 minutes ago, after they left legal, but before they got here. A tense silence filled the room. Well, Sarah said, trying to lighten the mood, at least we caught it before sending. Can you imagine the look on the Japanese team's faces, getting a proposal that asks them to work for free for a year and a half and also give us full rights to all their future ideas? They'd think we were joking. Some of the employees laughed nervously, but Nicholas remained serious. Andrew, I want a full investigation. Someone tried to sabotage this deal. It could have been an honest mistake, Richard suggested. The system glitches sometimes. Mistake? Sarah picked up another document. Then look at this mistake. The termination clause completely favors the other party, and this paragraph literally says we give up any compensation if the contract is broken. How are you spotting all this so quickly? Patricia asked, genuinely impressed. Sarah shrugged. I spent years memorizing complicated orders from picky customers. I want a latte with almond milk, but only 1/3 almond, 2/3 soy, extra foam, but not too hot, 3 pumps of sugar-free vanilla, but add half a spoon of brown sugar, not the white one. Compared to that, business contracts are easy. Despite the tension, Nicholas almost smiled. All right, Sarah, I need you to rewrite all these documents with the correct terms. Patricia, work with her. Andrew, I want to know exactly how this happened. Richard quickly offered. I can oversee the document corrections. That won't be necessary, Nicholas said firmly. Sarah can handle it. Richard's face stayed neutral, but Sarah noticed a tight muscle twitch in his jaw. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah worked carefully through the documents with Patricia at her side. At first distant, the secretary gradually warmed up. You know, you're not what I expected, Patricia commented. Let me guess, you thought I wouldn't know the difference between a memo and a menu? Patricia laughed. Something like that. Sorry for the judgment. No hard feelings. I'd probably feel the same if my boss hired someone straight from a restaurant. As they worked, Sarah began to notice patterns in the errors. They weren't random, they were strategically placed to look accidental, but cause major damage. Patricia, can you check who last accessed these files in the system? Let me take a look. Patricia typed quickly. That's odd. The log only shows a generic system user. But that shouldn't be possible. Everyone's supposed to log in with personal credentials. Sarah kept that detail in mind. Someone had tried to cover their tracks, but not completely. By the end of the day, with the corrected documents sent, Sarah decided to dig a little deeper. She stayed after hours, saying she was tidying her desk. Once the office emptied, she logged into the computer. Her tech skills were basic, another unexpected benefit of having to fix the restaurant's ordering system when the tech guy took too long. She navigated through the system logs, looking for anything strange. Bingo, she whispered when she found it. There were irregular logins to the system, always around important meetings. The pattern was clear. Someone had been sabotaging deals on purpose. But why? Working late on your first day? Sarah almost jumped out of her chair. Richard was standing in the doorway watching her. Jesus! Richard! Trying to give me a heart attack? Sorry, I saw the lights on and came to check. He walked in, his steps silent on the carpet. Find anything interesting? Just getting familiar with the system, Sarah said, quickly closing the windows. Richard stepped closer, too close for comfort. You know, Sarah, this is a complex corporate environment. It's not like waiting tables. Sometimes people with no experience misread situations. Are you suggesting something? Only that it's wise to stick to your assigned tasks. Leave the investigations to those with experience. Sarah stood up and faced him. Funny, because those with experience almost let mistakes worth millions slip through. Richard's smile was cold. Everyone makes mistakes, some bigger than others. For example, it'd be a shame if someone found out about your interesting past. My past? Just an observation. Good night, Sarah. He left, leaving her with a knot in her stomach. Sarah grabbed her things, her mind racing. Richard knew something, or he was bluffing. More importantly, was he the one sabotaging things? In the elevator, she ran into the night security guard, a kind older man named Harold. First week's always the hardest, he said, noticing her tired expression. You have no idea, Harold. Mind if I give you some advice? I've worked here 20 years. Seen a lot of people come and go. The ones who last are the ones who learn how to play the game, but never forget who they are. Sarah smiled. Thank you, I'll remember that. As she walked toward the subway, Sarah reflected on the day. She had saved another deal, but had discovered something much more troubling. Someone was actively trying to harm Nicholas's company. The question was, why? And more importantly, how did Richard know about her past? Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Nicholas. Excellent work today. The Japanese team was impressed with the revised documents. You have a sharp eye for detail. Sarah smiled and typed back. Thanks. Heads up. I think we have a bigger problem than typos. His reply came quickly. We'll talk tomorrow. And Sarah, be careful who you trust. She put the phone away, Nicholas's warning echoing in her mind. The corporate world was definitely more dangerous than waiting tables. At least there, when someone wanted to stab you in the back, they usually did it with a salad fork, not forged documents. The next day promised to be even more interesting. And Sarah had the feeling Richard was just getting started. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office with a strange feeling in her stomach. Nicholas's warning about trust and Richard's veiled threat from the night before still echoed in her head. She tried to shake off the negative thoughts while organizing her desk. Good morning, Sarah. Patricia greeted her. genuinely friendly after the previous day working together. Ready for another day of hunting for errors? Always ready, Sarah replied, forcing a smile. Today I promise to catch at least 3 stray commas and 1 rogue semicolon. Patricia laughed, but her expression shifted when she saw Richard approaching with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, board meeting in 5 minutes. Mandatory attendance, he announced. Board meeting? But I didn't get any. Last-minute decision. Don't be late. He turned and walked away, leaving a trail of bad energy behind him. Patricia frowned. That's odd. Board meetings are usually scheduled weeks in advance. Sarah felt the knot in her stomach tighten. Something tells me I'm not going to like this. 5 minutes later, she walked into the imposing boardroom. The oval table was surrounded by serious faces, board members, directors, and Nicholas at the head, looking just as surprised as she was by the sudden meeting. Ah, our guest of honor has arrived, Richard said, motioning for her to sit. Sarah chose a seat close to Nicholas, trying to appear confident despite her racing heart. Richard, what's the reason for this unscheduled meeting? Nicholas asked, his tone carrying a clear warning. Corporate security, Richard replied smoothly, opening a folder. As COO, it's my responsibility to ensure all employees are properly vetted, especially those in trusted positions. What are you getting at? Nicholas asked. Well, I took the liberty of running a background check on our newest employee. Just as a precaution, of course. Richard gave Sarah a cold smile. The results were enlightening. Sarah felt her blood run cold. So that was it. He was going to expose her life like some kind of show. Richard began reading from the file. Sarah Thompson, 28 years old, enrolled in the business administration program at NYU, but, he paused dramatically, dropped out in her 2nd year. Reason? Delinquency. She couldn't afford the tuition. Murmurs rippled around the room. Sarah kept her chin up, though her cheeks burned. Since then, Richard continued, clearly savoring the moment, she's worked only as a waitress. 5 years at the same restaurant. No corporate experience. No formal qualifications beyond high school. So what? A voice interrupted. It was Thomas, one of the younger board members. Half of Silicon Valley doesn't have a degree. Richard ignored him. But it gets more interesting. The reason she dropped out? Her mother, Linda Thompson, was diagnosed with cancer. Sarah had to choose between her education and her mother's treatment. The room fell silent. Sarah clenched her fists under the table, fighting back the tears threatening to fall. A touching story, Richard went on, his tone now poisonous. But I wonder, couldn't it be just a little too convenient? A waitress deep in debt suddenly shows up, saves a deal, and now has access to confidential company information. Who's to say she's not taking advantage of Mr. Sterling's generosity? Enough. Nicholas slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Richard, you've crossed the line. I'm simply protecting the company's interests, Richard said defensively. Someone has to be objective here. Sarah finally found her voice, even though it was shaking. You want the truth, Richard? Yes, I dropped out of college. Yes, I chose my mother over a diploma. And you know what? I'd do it all over again. She stood up, looking each person in the room in the eye. I spent 5 years serving people who looked at me just like you're looking at me now, like I was worth less because I wore an apron instead of a suit. But you know what I learned? I learned languages by listening to customers. I learned negotiation by mediating between a hot-headed chef and impossible clients. I learned how to read people, how to solve problems, how to think on my feet. Her voice grew stronger. I don't have an MBA, that's true, but I saved 2 deals in 2 days. How many MBAs in here can say the same? Pretty words, Richard replied. But how do you explain someone with no experience spotting mistakes that our legal team missed? Maybe because she herself. Choose your next words very carefully, Richard. Nicholas's voice was ice cold. Are you suggesting Sarah is involved in some kind of scheme? I'm just raising legitimate questions. Nicholas stood up slowly. Let me raise a few questions myself. Why are you so invested in discrediting someone who's been helping the company? Why this unauthorized investigation? And what makes you think you have the right to expose an employee's personal life like this? Nicholas, an older board member, Margaret Whitman, interjected. Richard may have been harsh, but his concerns are valid. The young woman has no formal qualifications. Qualifications? Nicholas nearly laughed. Do you know what I see when I look at Sarah? I see someone who sacrificed her future for her family, who worked tirelessly to support her sick mother, who taught herself 3 languages, who has the courage to sit across from billion-dollar investors and make the impossible look easy. He looked straight at Sarah. Talent doesn't come from diplomas. It comes from results, and she's proven her worth more than some people here with walls full of certificates. The room was divided. Some board members looked thoughtful, others skeptical. Thomas and a few younger directors nodded in agreement. That's very touching, Richard said, but emotion doesn't protect the company from risk. Do you know what the real risk is? Sarah cut in, her patience finally gone. People like you, who'd rather protect their egos than recognize real talent, who are so afraid of change, they sabotage anyone who doesn't fit the mold. How dare you? I'm not done, Sarah continued. Yes, I'm a former waitress. Yes, I'm drowning in medical bills. And yes, I'm learning as I go. But at least I'm honest about it. What's your excuse for being a... Sarah, Nicholas gently touched her arm. That's enough. She took a deep breath, realizing she was shaking. Sorry, I need some air. Sarah left the room quickly, ignoring the stares. Out in the hallway, she leaned against the wall, finally letting a few tears fall. Here. She looked up and saw Nicholas offering her a handkerchief. Is the meeting over? She asked, taking it. I sent everyone home. Richard will be having a serious talk with HR about professional conduct. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. He wasn't wrong, you know. I really am just a waitress pretending to understand this world. Nicholas leaned against the wall next to her. Want to know a secret? Half the people in that room inherited their positions. Born into wealth, given every opportunity. You fought for every step. That doesn't make you less. That makes you stronger. Why are you being so kind to me? Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. Because I recognize a fighter when I see one. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you remind me that success isn't just about numbers and contracts. It's about people. They stood in silence for a moment. Sarah felt something shift between them, a connection that went beyond the professional. You know, she said finally, trying to lighten the mood, my mom always said I had a terrible habit of talking too much when I'm nervous. I guess I proved her right today. Nicholas smiled. You stood up for yourself. I admire that. Thanks for standing up for me in there. Always. The moment was interrupted by Andrew rushing down the hallway, his face pale. Mr. Sterling, we have a serious problem. I just got a call from the Wall Street Journal. They have our confidential documents. Someone leaked our expansion strategy for Asia. They're asking for a statement. Nicholas went rigid. What documents exactly? The full plans, financial projections, potential partners, everything. If they publish it, our competitors will have our entire strategy, Nicholas finished. When did they call? 5 minutes ago. The reporter said he received the documents anonymously this morning. Sarah and Nicholas exchanged a look. The morning had started with a personal attack on her. Now, a leak that could cost the company millions. Coincidence? Sarah asked quietly. I don't believe in coincidences, Nicholas replied, his face set in determination. Andrew, call the cybersecurity team. I want to know exactly how these documents got out. As Andrew rushed off to carry out the order, Nicholas turned to Sarah. Looks like someone's playing dirty. The question is, why? Sarah thought of Richard, his unauthorized digging, his veiled threats. I think I know where to start looking. Be careful, Nicholas warned. If we're right, this person is dangerous. I don't want you putting yourself at risk. Sarah almost laughed. After having her life exposed and humiliated in public, a little corporate investigation felt almost relaxing. Nicholas, I survived 5 years dealing with drunk customers, hot-headed chefs, and lousy tips. I think I can handle a backstabbing executive. But as they returned to the office, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. The leak was too serious to be just petty revenge. Someone wanted to destroy Sterling Enterprises, and Sarah was caught right in the middle of it. News of the leak spread through the office like wildfire. In less than an hour, everyone knew that confidential documents about the Asian expansion had made their way to the press. The atmosphere, already tense after the board meeting, became absolutely suffocating. Sarah was at her makeshift desk, trying to process everything. when she heard Richard's sharp voice echoing down the hallway. "It's just too much of a coincidence," he declared for anyone within earshot. "An ex-waitress gets hired, gets access to sensitive files, and suddenly our plans are leaked to the media?" Patricia, who was organizing files nearby, whispered to Sarah, "Ignore him. He's clearly trying to shift the blame." "Shift the blame from what?" Sarah asked, though she already had a hunch. Before Patricia could answer, Richard appeared at Sarah's desk, followed by several curious executives. "Miss Thompson," he began with fake politeness, "don't you find it interesting that this leak happened right after your, let's say, emotional performance at the board meeting?" Sarah looked up slowly. "Are you accusing me of something, Richard?" "Just pointing out the facts. You were publicly humiliated, you have clear financial motives, and now confidential information shows up in the press. Any investigator would connect the dots." "Any lazy investigator, you mean?" Sarah shot back. "Real investigators look for evidence, not scapegoats." The growing crowd watched their exchange like a tennis match. "Scapegoat?" Richard laughed humorlessly. "You had access to those files yesterday when you reviewed the Japanese contracts. Coincidence? I also had access to the executive bathroom. Does that want to blame me if the toilet breaks?" A few employees stifled laughter, which clearly irritated Richard. "This is not a joke. The company's reputation is at stake." "I completely agree," Nicholas interrupted, stepping out of the elevator. His presence instantly changed the mood. "That's exactly why we're going to run a professional investigation, not a hallway trial." "Nicholas," Richard turned to him, "surely you see the obvious connection." "What I see," Nicholas cut him off, "is my chief operating officer making accusations without proof. Andrew, I want the cybersecurity team in my office in 10 minutes. And Richard, if you have solid evidence, present it. Otherwise, I suggest you get back to work." Richard opened his mouth to protest, but Nicholas's look shut him down. He stormed off, muttering something about favoritism. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Sarah and Nicholas mostly alone. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet. This is serious. The Wall Street Journal is set to publish the story tomorrow unless we get a court order." He ran a hand through his hair, something he rarely did, a sign of frustration. "I need you to be honest with me. Did you share those documents with anyone?" Sarah looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't even know those documents existed until Andrew mentioned them. I spent the night checking contracts for errors, not leaking company secrets." Nicholas nodded. "I believe you, but we're going to need more than just my trust to fix this." The meeting with the cybersecurity team was eye-opening. The head of the department, a young tech genius named Kevin Chen, presented his initial findings. The leak was sophisticated, Kevin explained, projecting data onto the screen. Someone used valid credentials but masked the IP address. It happened at 3:47 in the morning. "Who was in the building at that time?" Nicholas asked. "According to security logs, no one. The access was remote." Sarah studied the data, her mind working. "Kevin, can you show which files were accessed in the last 48 hours? "Sure." He typed quickly. "Interesting, there's a pattern of unusual activity. Someone was specifically looking for the Asian expansion documents." "As if they knew exactly what to look for," Sarah murmured. "This isn't a random leak. It's targeted." Nicholas looked at her with surprise. "Where did you learn about digital security?" "Food Network," she answered with a straight face. "Just kidding. The restaurant's ordering system used to get hacked all the time. I learned the basics to protect us." Kevin laughed. "Well, you're right. This was definitely planned." As the team kept digging, Sarah realized something. "Kevin, can you check the email logs? If someone leaked the documents, they might have left a trail." "We already checked. Nothing was sent from the company servers." "What about photos?" Sarah suggested. "Someone could have taken pictures of the screen and sent them from a personal phone." Kevin paused. "I didn't think of that. Let me check the access logs to see if anyone spent enough time on a document to photograph it page by page." While Kevin worked, Nicholas pulled Sarah aside. "You're thinking like an investigator." "I'm thinking like someone who's seen waiters snap pictures of customers' credit cards. People think they're clever, but they always leave patterns." "I found something," Kevin called out. 3 days ago, someone spent exactly 47 minutes on the Asian expansion file. That's enough time to photograph every page." "Who was it?" Nicholas asked. Kevin hesitated. The credentials show Sarah Thompson. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That's impossible, she protested. 3 days ago, I was still waiting tables. Exactly, Nicholas said slowly. Kevin, when was that account created? More typing. Monday, the day Sarah started. So someone created a fake account using my name before I even got here, Sarah concluded. That's premeditated, Nicholas finished. Someone planned this from the start. The meeting room door swung open, and Andrew rushed in. Mr. Sterling, we have a problem. A business blogger just posted about the leak. They're speculating it was revenge by an employee, and, he hesitated, they mentioned Sarah by name. Nicholas grabbed Andrew's tablet, scanning quickly. His face darkened. How do they know about Sarah? That wasn't public. Sarah read over his shoulder. The post was toxic, painting her as a bitter opportunist who leaked documents out of spite after being exposed in the board meeting. Only people who were in that meeting knew about that, she pointed out. That means our saboteur was in the room, Nicholas concluded. Andrew, I want a list of everyone who was there. Kevin, keep tracking. Sarah. I'm doing my own investigation, she said firmly. Someone's using me as a scapegoat. I'm not going to just sit around. Nicholas looked like he was about to argue, but saw the determination in her eyes. Be careful. Whoever's behind this is dangerous. Sarah spent the rest of the day quietly investigating. She used her observation skills, sharpened from years of reading customers, to spot suspicious behavior. Richard avoided eye contact. Some executives whispered when she walked by, but it was Patricia who accidentally gave the first real clue. It's odd, Patricia said over coffee. Richard asked for access to the Asian expansion files last week. Said it was for a presentation, but there was no presentation. When exactly? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Thursday. I remember because my computer froze and he was furious about the delay. Sarah filed that away. Thursday was one day before she got hired. The pieces were starting to fit. That night, Sarah stayed late again, this time with permission. Nicholas had given her full system access to help with the investigation. You should head home, Nicholas said, finding her still working at 8 o'clock. You've been here since early morning. So have you, she pointed out. Besides, I'm used to long shifts. At least here, nobody throws food at me when I'm late. He pulled up a chair, sitting beside her. How are you holding up? Sarah stopped typing. Honestly, I'm furious. I've worked hard my whole life, and now I'm being accused of something I wouldn't even have the tech skills to pull off if I wanted to. Don't underestimate your skills. You've been surprising me since day one. Thanks for the vote of confidence, but hacking systems is a bit different than memorizing complicated orders. They shared a brief, comfortable silence before Nicholas spoke again. You know, when I built this company, I thought the hard part would be landing clients, closing deals. I never imagined I'd have to deal with internal sabotage. Welcome to the real world, Sarah said with a half smile. At the restaurant, sabotage was more direct. Salt instead of sugar, lost orders in the kitchen. Seems like every workplace has its own politics. The difference is that there, the consequence was a bad tip. Here, it's millions of dollars. Nicholas watched her work for a moment. You shouldn't be going through this. If I hadn't hired you, I'd still be serving coffee to people who treat me like furniture, Sarah interrupted. I don't regret it, not even with all this craziness. Even being accused of corporate crimes? Especially because of that, it means someone sees me as a threat. After years of being invisible, it's almost flattering. Nicholas laughed, a real, genuine laugh that cut the tension. Only you could find a silver lining in this. Sarah was about to respond when something on the screen caught her attention. Wait, that's strange. What is it? This file here. It's in a system folder, but the name, Contingency ST. She clicked to open it, but it was password protected. ST, your initials? Nicholas suggested. Possibly. But why would someone create a contingency file with my initials? Sarah tried a few obvious passwords with no luck. It's locked up tight. Can you tell when it was created? Sarah checked the file properties. Last Thursday, the same day Richard asked for access to the files. They looked at each other, the same conclusion forming in both their minds. This isn't a coincidence, Nicholas said slowly. Definitely not. Someone was setting the stage before they even met me. Sarah saved the file path. I need Kevin to crack this. First, let's go home. It's almost 9 o'clock, and you need some rest. We'll continue tomorrow. As she packed up her things, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was close to something big. The file named Contingency ST might be the key to proving her innocence. In the elevator, Nicholas broke the silence. Sarah, no matter what we find, I want you to know I don't regret hiring you. Even if I'm a magnet for trouble? Especially because of that, I was getting bored with corporate life. Sarah laughed. Careful what you wish for, Mr. Sterling. With me around, boredom is the last thing you'll feel. Little did she know how prophetic those words would be. The hidden file was just the tip of the iceberg of a conspiracy bigger than either of them imagined. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office determined. She had spent part of the night thinking about the mysterious file and couldn't wait for Kevin to help unlock it. But something felt off. The office was strangely quiet, and people avoided looking at her more than usual. Sarah! Patricia rushed toward her, face pale. Where have you been? The board called an emergency meeting. They're waiting for you. Emergency meeting? I just got here. It was Richard. He says he found solid proof about the leak. Sarah, he's saying that you... Patricia didn't need to finish. Sarah understood immediately. Somehow, Richard had gotten ahead of her. She entered the boardroom and found stern faces around the table. Nicholas stood, clearly tense. Richard, on the other hand, wore a triumphant smile that made Sarah's stomach turn. Well, our saboteur finally shows up, Richard announced. Richard, I told you to watch your tone, Nicholas warned. Tone? Nicholas, the evidence is irrefutable. Richard projected documents onto the screen. I found access logs showing Sarah downloaded confidential files onto a USB drive at 11:47 p.m. Monday night. Sarah frowned. Monday night, I was home watching reruns of cooking shows and eating leftover lasagna. I don't even have a company-issued USB stick. Exactly what a guilty person would say, Richard shot back. Margaret Whitman, the senior board member, adjusted her glasses. Miss Thompson, can you prove where you were? Of course, my Netflix history can confirm it. I watched 3 back-to-back episodes of Under Pressure Kitchen. I can even tell you who got eliminated. Some of the board members looked puzzled by her unexpected answer. That's not evidence, Richard insisted. Anyone can leave the TV on. True, Sarah agreed. But I doubt anyone could tweet sarcastic comments about the contestants while supposedly hacking corporate systems. I have the timestamps. She reached for her phone, but Richard cut her off. Too convenient. Besides, I found more. He clicked to the next slide. This email was sent from Sarah's account to an anonymous address with the documents attached. Sarah studied the screen. Richard, this is ridiculous. First, who commits corporate crimes using their own email account? Second, look at the grammar in that message. Please find attach the confidential document. I may be a former waitress, but I know how to conjugate verbs. Maybe you wrote it that way on purpose, Richard suggested. Oh sure, because criminals always add grammar mistakes to give their crime a little charm, Sarah shot back. Next theory, did I also leave sticky notes saying, it was me? Signed, Sarah the Saboteur? Thomas, the young board member, stifled a laugh. This is not a joke, Richard exploded. The company's reputation is at stake. I agree, Sarah said seriously. Which is exactly why we should be looking for the real culprit instead of wasting time with made-up accusations. Made up? Richard turned red. I have system logs right here. Kevin Chen raised his hand cautiously. May I take a look at those logs? Richard hesitated. That's not necessary. They're authentic. I'm sure they are, Kevin said diplomatically. But as head of digital security, I need to verify all the data. Nicholas jumped on the opportunity. Good idea, Kevin. Go over everything. While Kevin reviewed the data on his laptop, Sarah decided to take a risk. You know what I find curious? Last night, Nicholas and I found a file called Contingency ST, created last Thursday, before I was even hired. Richard's face lost color for a split second before he regained composure. Irrelevant. Probably an old system file. With my initials? What a cosmic coincidence. Margaret Whitman stepped in. Mr. Sterling, the evidence presented is concerning. The board needs to consider the immediate dismissal of Miss Thompson. Absolutely not, Nicholas said firmly. We're not going to make rash decisions based on questionable evidence. Questionable? Another board member, William Porter, interrupted. The logs look clear. As clear as the documents with errors that almost cost us the Japanese deal? Sarah asked. Someone is manipulating information in this company, and it's not me. Enough! Richard slammed the table. I demand the board vote now. I have a question, Sarah said, pretending to be innocent. Richard, can you explain why you requested access to the Asian expansion files last Thursday? Patricia said you told her it was for a presentation. Richard blinked. That's not relevant, isn't it? Because there was no presentation. I checked the calendar. I changed my mind about the presentation. Ah, I see. Changed your mind. Like you changed your mind about investigating me without permission, or leaking my personal life to that blogger? I don't know what you're talking about. Kevin looked up from his laptop. Interesting. These logs were modified. Everyone turned to him. What do you mean, modified? Nicholas asked. The timestamps were altered. It's subtle, but the verification code doesn't match. Someone inserted these records after the fact. Richard started to sweat. There must be a mistake. The only mistake, Sarah said, standing up, was underestimating the intelligence of the people in this room. You put together a clever plan, Richard. You planted evidence before you even met me, leaked documents, tried to frame me. But you missed one thing. Sloppy frames always have holes. You can't prove anything, Richard shouted. Not yet, Nicholas said calmly, cutting in. But we will. Kevin, I want a full audit of all systems. Every access, every change, everything. Margaret Whitman looked disturbed. Mr. Sterling, these are serious accusations. Which is exactly why we need to investigate properly, Nicholas replied. I propose we suspend this meeting until we have solid facts. But the evidence, William Porter began, was discredited by our head of security, Nicholas cut him off. Unless you doubt Kevin's competence too? The silence spoke volumes. Richard tried one last move. This is favoritism. Nicholas is protecting his favorite. My employee, Nicholas corrected, who has been accused based on false evidence. If anyone here has a problem with me defending the integrity of this investigation, take it up with the CEO. You are the CEO, Thomas noted, clearly enjoying the moment. Exactly. Margaret sighed. Very well. We have 48 hours for a full investigation. Until then, no action will be taken. The board members started leaving, murmuring among themselves. Richard walked out with heavy steps, but not before shooting a poisonous look at Sarah. Once the room was empty, with only Sarah, Nicholas, and Kevin remaining, Sarah collapsed into her chair. That was, she began. Intense? Nicholas suggested. I was going to say like a bad crime show episode, but intense works. Kevin was still typing. I can access the actual logs. It'll take some time, but I'll find out who did this. Thank you, Kevin, Nicholas said. Sarah, are you okay? I'm great. Nothing like being accused of corporate crimes to start the morning off right, she replied sarcastically. But seriously, Richard is desperate. That makes him dangerous. Nicholas nodded. That's exactly why we're going to turn the tables. Kevin, keep digging. I want every piece of evidence you can find. And what about me? Sarah asked. Nicholas smiled, and there was something calculating in that smile she hadn't seen before. You're going to keep being yourself. Richard expects you to back down. Instead, we'll give him exactly what he doesn't expect. Which is? A chance to expose himself. Tomorrow, I'm calling a meeting with all the executives, and we're going to set a little trap for our saboteur. Sarah smiled back. You know, for such a serious CEO, you've got an interesting vengeful streak. I learned from the best, he replied, looking at her. After all, who better to think outside the box than someone who's never been inside one? As they left the room, Sarah felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The battle was far from over, but at least now, they were striking back. And if there was one thing she had learned from years working in restaurants, it was that the best dish is always served at the right moment. The next day, the main conference room at Sterling Enterprises was packed. Nicholas had called every executive, manager, and director to what he labeled an emergency strategy meeting. Sarah watched from her seat near the door, noting how tense Richard looked, adjusting his tie over and over. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Nicholas began, his voice calm but authoritative. As you know, we're facing a serious crisis with the leak of confidential documents, but today, we're going to resolve this once and for all. Richard cleared his throat. Nicholas, I thought we had 48 hours for the investigation. Why the meeting now? Because Kevin made some important discoveries, Nicholas replied, motioning to the head of cybersecurity. Kevin stood up and connected his laptop to the projector. Overnight, I was able to trace the real origin of the leak. It was complex work, but I found some interesting patterns. Sarah discreetly watched Richard. His hands trembled slightly as he grabbed a glass of water. First, Kevin continued, I confirmed that the logs presented yesterday against Sarah were definitely falsified. But what's more interesting is how they were faked. He projected lines of code on the screen. To most, it looked like a foreign language. But for Sarah, who had spent hours with Kevin preparing the presentation, every line was part of the puzzle. The saboteur used a specific method to mask IP addresses, Kevin explained. It's an advanced technique, not something just anyone would know how to do. That's fascinating, Kevin, Richard interrupted. But I don't see how this helps identify the culprit. Nicholas smiled slightly. Patience, Richard. Kevin, please continue. Here's the interesting part, Kevin said, clicking to the next slide. This specific technique leaves a unique digital signature, like an electronic fingerprint. Sarah decided it was time for her part. Kevin, can you explain what the code XK47-beta means, the one that keeps showing up? Kevin nodded. Good observation, Sarah. XK47-beta is a proprietary security protocol. Very specific, very rare. How rare? Nicholas asked, though he already knew the answer. Only 3 people in this company know that protocol, Kevin said. Me, the former head of IT who retired last year, and Nicholas pressed. Richard stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're trying to frame me with technical jargon. No one mentioned your name, Richard, Sarah said innocently. Why are you so defensive? Because it's obvious where this is going. Richard waved his arms frantically. You two planned this to pin it on me. Patricia, seated nearby, frowned. Richard, you said yesterday you didn't understand anything about security protocols. How do you know this points to you? Richard's face turned red. That's not anyone can see. Actually, Kevin continued calmly, I was going to say the third person was our external security consultant, but it's interesting that you assumed I was talking about you. The room went silent. Several executives exchanged uneasy glances. Nicholas stood up. Richard, do you have something you'd like to tell us? I don't have to say anything. Richard was clearly panicking now. This is a setup. Sarah obviously conspired with you all. Oh sure, Sarah said, folding her arms. I, the waitress without a degree, conspired to create complex security protocols I can't even pronounce. Makes perfect sense. A few executives laughed nervously. Let's try something different. Nicholas suggested. Richard, can you explain to everyone exactly what the XK47 beta protocol is? Richard swallowed hard. It's an encryption system. What kind of system? Kevin asked. A sophisticated system. Sophisticated how? Sarah added. Like a double espresso kind of sophisticated, or quantum physics sophisticated? Stop making fun of me, Richard burst out. Interesting, Kevin muttered, typing quickly. Because XK47 beta isn't an encryption system, it's a tracking protocol. I made up the name 5 minutes ago. The revelation hit like a bomb. Richard turned pale as a sheet. But you said, Richard stammered. I said it was a proprietary protocol. You assumed the rest, Kevin explained. And only someone trying to use real protocols to cover up activity would know to associate it with encryption. This doesn't prove anything, Richard said desperately. Sarah pulled out a folder she had brought. How about this then? Remember the ST contingency file Nicholas and I found? Kevin was able to open it. She pulled out documents. It's a detailed plan to frame a new employee in case something went wrong. Written last Thursday, before I was even hired. Thomas, the young director, took a copy. This is your digital signature on the document, Richard. Forged, Richard shouted. It's all forged. Funny, Patricia cut in. You were so sure the evidence against Sarah was real yesterday. Now that it's pointing at you, suddenly everything is forged? Andrew, who had stayed quiet until now, raised his hand. May I add something? Richard asked me last week for information about the candidates for the personal assistant role. Said it was for security purposes. I thought it was odd at the time. You wanted to know who Nicholas would hire, Sarah concluded. So you could prepare your scapegoat. Richard looked around the room, realizing he had lost all support. You don't understand. Nicholas is ruining this company with his impulsive decisions. Hiring a waitress? What kind of message does that send? The message, Nicholas said coldly, is that I value competence over pedigree, something you clearly don't understand. I've given years to this company, Richard yelled. Years, and you throw it all away for a woman you barely know. I didn't throw anything away, Nicholas replied. You did when you chose to sabotage deals and leak confidential information. Kevin raised his hand. Just got confirmation. We tracked the account that received the payment for the leak. It's registered in the Cayman Islands, but we connected it to other transactions. Richard, would you like to explain why you received $50,000 on Tuesday? The silence was deafening. Richard sank into his chair, defeated. I just wanted to protect the company. By selling our secrets? Sarah asked in disbelief. That's an interesting definition of protection. You don't understand. Richard glared at her. I worked alongside Nicholas for 5 years. 5 years. Then you show up, with your tricks and your charm, and suddenly he listens to no one else. My tricks? Sarah repeated. You mean, like, doing my job honestly? Several executives shook their heads in disapproval at Richard. Nicholas picked up the phone. Security, we need you in the main conference room. He looked at Richard. You have 2 options. Leave quietly and face termination for cause, or resist and add criminal charges to the list. Richard stood slowly, all arrogance gone. You'll regret this, Nicholas. She's going to destroy everything we built. The only person who destroyed anything here was you, Nicholas said. As security escorted Richard out, the room erupted in conversation. Sarah found herself surrounded by colleagues who had once kept their distance. Amazing how you noticed the patterns, Patricia said, impressed. How did you stay so calm? Thomas asked. I'd have lost it. Years of dealing with drunk customers complaining about their food, Sarah replied. Compared to that, a crooked executive is nothing. The crowd laughed, and Sarah realized something had changed. The suspicious looks were gone, replaced by genuine respect. Slowly, the room emptied until only Sarah and Nicholas remained. You were brilliant, Nicholas said, stepping closer. The idea of the fake protocol was genius. That was Kevin's idea, Sarah admitted. I just suggested the name. XK47 was the code for the most complicated specialty coffee at the restaurant. Nicholas laughed, a real, warm sound. Of course it was. They stood close, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Sarah could feel the warmth coming from him, saw the way he looked at her, not like a boss looking at an employee, but like something more. Sarah, he began, his voice soft, these last few days working with you, seeing your courage, your intelligence. Sarah's heart sped up. She knew where this was going. She could feel the moment building. Nicholas leaned in slightly. I've never met anyone like you. For a second, Sarah almost gave in, almost let the moment happen. But then reality hit. How complicated it would be, the gossip, how it could tarnish the credibility she had just begun to build. Well, she said, stepping back and breaking the moment, that's because you clearly don't eat out much. Smart waitresses are more common than you think. Nicholas blinked, clearly thrown off by the sudden shift. Sarah? Would you look at the time? She exclaimed, grabbing her things in a rush. I've got to go. My mom's waiting to hear how the day went. She'll be thrilled I wasn't arrested. Sarah, wait. But she was already at the door. See you tomorrow, Nicholas. Great job today, teamwork and all that. She practically ran down the hallway, leaving Nicholas standing in the empty room, confused and clearly frustrated. In the elevator, Sarah leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. That had been close, way too close. But she couldn't afford to complicate things. Not now, not when she had finally earned some respect. Even if part of her wanted badly to walk back into that room. Focus, Sarah, she murmured to herself. You came here to work, not to live a fairy tale. But as the elevator descended, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Nicholas had looked at her. Like she was the only person in the world. 3 days had passed since Richard had been exposed and escorted out of Sterling Enterprises. The office now ran with a new sense of ease without the constant tension he used to bring. Sarah had settled into a comfortable routine, finally accepted by the team. But there was still something in the air between her and Nicholas, an unresolved tension since that almost moment in the conference room. It was on a Thursday afternoon that Nicholas appeared at her desk, hands in his pockets, looking strangely nervous. Sarah, Do you have plans for tonight? She looked up from the report she was reviewing. Let me check my packed schedule. Netflix, leftover Chinese food, and maybe trying to convince my imaginary cat to like me. Why? I'd like to have dinner with you. Before she could protest, he added quickly, not a business dinner, just dinner. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Nicholas, please, I promise it won't be anywhere fancy, no judging waiters or French menus. She couldn't help but smile. Where then? It's a surprise, but I can guarantee you won't need to Google the names of the dishes. Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. All right, but if someone shows up with a violin, I'm leaving. At 7 o'clock, Nicholas picked her up in front of the building. Sarah had expected a limousine, but he was driving a regular sedan, wearing jeans and a simple shirt. It was the first time she'd seen him out of his corporate uniform. Wow, she said as she got in. You own normal clothes. I'm shocked. I can also tie my own shoes, he replied, smiling. The surprise got even better when they stopped in front of a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. The place was cozy, with checkered tablecloths and candles and empty wine bottles. How do you know this place? Sarah asked as they walked in. I lived in this neighborhood when I was starting out, Nicholas explained. Before Sterling Enterprises. Before all of it. I ate here 3 times a week because it was the only place that let me pay at the end of the month. They sat at a table in the corner, and Sarah realized she was seeing a completely different side of him. So the great Nicholas Sterling was once broke like me? She teased. Worse, at least you had a steady job. I lived off freelance gigs and instant noodles. The waiter, an older Italian gentleman, recognized Nicholas immediately. Nicky? It's been ages? The usual lasagna? Nicky? Sarah repeated, delighted. Oh, this is pure gold. Nicholas blushed slightly. Giuseppe, this is Sarah. Sarah, Giuseppe kept me fed during the lean years. Any friend of Nicky's is welcome here, Giuseppe declared. I'll bring the house special for both of you. While they waited for the food, the conversation flowed naturally. Without the formality of the office, Nicholas was surprisingly relaxed, almost funny. So, Sarah said, taking a sip of wine, why did you bring me here? You could have impressed me with some 5-star place. Nicholas grew serious. Because I wanted you to see who I really am. Not the CEO, not the millionaire, just me. And who are you, Nicholas Sterling? He thought for a moment. A guy who worked hard, got lucky, and lately has been realizing that success doesn't mean much if you're alone at the top. Sarah played with her napkin. Is loneliness the price of power? It doesn't have to be. He looked at her directly. Sarah, I need to tell you something. These past few days working with you, I've never met anyone like you. Nicholas, let me finish, please. He took a deep breath. You're smart in a way that doesn't come from books. You're funny without trying. You're brave in a way that makes me want to be better. And you're completely, frustratingly unpredictable. Sarah laughed nervously. You forgot stubborn and talks too much when nervous. Those two. He smiled. Sarah, I know this complicates everything. I know you probably have 1,000 logical reasons to keep your distance. But, she whispered, but I've spent my whole life being logical, and look where it's gotten me. Rich and alone, having dinner with assistants who fear me instead of challenge me. Sarah took another sip of wine, gathering courage. You know what's funny? I spent the whole week preparing a speech about how this would be inappropriate, how it would hurt my credibility, how people would talk. And then I realized they talk anyway, so forget it. She looked him in the eyes. I feel the same, Nicholas. It's inconvenient, it's complicated, and it's probably a terrible idea. But, he repeated her words, but you make me laugh, you make me feel smart, and you look at me like I'm more than just a former waitress trying to pretend I belong in your world. Nicholas reached his hand across the table, and this time Sarah didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally. You're not pretending, he said gently. You belong in any world you choose. The moment was interrupted by Nicholas's phone ringing. He was about to ignore it, but Sarah saw the name on the screen. Andrew. Take it, she said. It could be important. Nicholas answered reluctantly. His expression quickly shifted from annoyed to concerned. What? When? Are you sure? He listened a few seconds more. We're on our way. What happened? Sarah asked as he hung up. Richard. He's reappeared as a senior consultant at Apex Corporation. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Apex was Sterling Enterprises' biggest competitor. That's bad? Worse, Andrew just found out they've scheduled an emergency meeting with our main Japanese investors for tomorrow. The same ones I helped close the deal with? Exactly. And there's more. Richard apparently has crucial information about irregular practices at Sterling Enterprises. Sarah let go of his hand. He's going to try to use my hiring against you. Say you hired someone unqualified, that you're putting personal relationships above business. Sarah. No, he's right. I'm a weak spot, a vulnerability he can exploit. She stood up. I need to go. Sarah, wait. She stopped at the door. I'm sorry, Nicholas. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. On the restaurant's TV, a news segment about Apex Corporation was playing, and in the background, for just a second, she saw something that made her heart race. A document on a table, partially visible, with a code she recognized. The same code from the forged files that nearly got her blamed. Sarah grabbed her phone and quickly snapped a photo of the TV screen. Maybe, just maybe, she had found exactly what they needed to turn things around. She ran down the sidewalk, still holding the phone with the picture of the screen. Nicholas caught up to her quickly, gently grabbing her arm. Sarah, wait. You can't just leave like this. Nicholas, you don't understand. She showed him the phone. Look at this. The code on those Apex documents. It's the same as the forged files. Richard's using the same system. Nicholas studied the image, his eyes narrowing. You're sure? Absolutely. I spent hours reviewing those codes with Kevin. I'd recognize them anywhere. Sarah began pacing, her mind racing. Richard isn't just trying to hurt you with the Japanese investors. He's doing something bigger. Let's get back to the office, Nicholas decided. We need Kevin. 30 minutes later, they were at Sterling Enterprises headquarters. The building was nearly empty, but Kevin was still there, as always. Weren't you supposed to be at a romantic dinner? Kevin asked, surprised to see them. Change of plans, Sarah said, connecting her phone to the computer. Kevin, I need you to analyze this. As Kevin examined the image, Sarah explained about Richard's connection to Apex. The young IT specialist's face grew more serious by the second. This is bad, he said finally. That code, Sarah's right, it's identical to the system Richard used here. But there's more. More? Nicholas asked. Kevin typed furiously. If he's using the same system, I can trace it. It's like following digital footprints. He paused. Wait, what is it? Sarah leaned over his shoulder. Richard's not just working with Apex. He's communicating with someone in Europe. Lots of encrypted emails going to Zurich, Berlin, Paris. Sarah felt the pieces falling into place. He's not just selling information to Apex. He's building an entire network. Selling Sterling's secrets to multiple buyers, Nicholas concluded, his face pale. If he succeeds, he could destroy our competitive advantage globally, Sarah finished. We need to stop him, now. Kevin kept typing. I found something. He scheduled a video call in 1 hour, midnight here, business hours in Europe. Can you intercept it? Nicholas asked. Better. I can break into the call, but we have to be smart about it. Sarah had an idea. Kevin, can you make it look like the breach came from inside Apex? A sly smile crossed Kevin's face. You're devious. Yes, I can do that. For the next 40 minutes, they worked intensely. Kevin prepared the technical intercept while Sarah and Nicholas reviewed the files they'd found. The pattern was clear. Richard had copied not only expansion strategies, but also proprietary formulas, client lists, even system passwords. He's been planning this for months, Nicholas murmured. Probably started before he even tried to frame me. The question is, why? Sarah wondered. It's not just about money. This is personal for him. Jealousy, Nicholas said simply. He always wanted to be CEO. When he realized he never would be, he decided to tear everything down. Connecting, Kevin announced. Total silence now. The screen came to life. Richard appeared, adjusting his camera. Soon, other windows opened. Executives from various European companies. Gentlemen, Richard began in English, then switched to German. Thank you for joining me. Sarah whispered translations to Nicholas as Richard continued. He was offering full packages of Sterling Enterprises information, including future projects not yet announced. The price is $5 million per regional package, Richard said. A small price for what I'm offering. One of the Europeans replied, How do we know your information is legitimate? Richard smiled. Because I worked beside Nicholas Sterling for 5 years. I know every secret, every weakness. For example, he started listing specific details only an insider would know. Sarah clenched her fist. It was worse than they imagined. "Kevin," she whispered, "can you record everything?" Kevin nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The meeting went on for another 20 minutes, with Richard negotiating prices and outlining details. Then one of the Europeans asked the crucial question, "And what about the assistant? This Sarah Thompson, isn't she a risk?" Richard laughed. "That waitress? Please. She barely knows how to turn on a computer. Nicholas hired her for, let's say, non-professional reasons. She's no threat." Sarah felt Nicholas tense beside her, but she touched his arm, asking him to stay calm. "In fact," Richard continued, "she's perfect for our plans. When Sterling Enterprises collapses, everyone will blame the incompetent girl Nicholas put in a position of trust. 2 birds with 1 stone." "That's enough," Sarah whispered. "Kevin, can you trace the locations of all participants?" "Already done. I have IPs, addresses, everything." "Perfect. Now let's end this." Sarah picked up Nicholas's phone and dialed a number. "Andrew, it's Sarah. I know it's late, but I need you to wake up our contacts at Interpol." "Yes, international police. We've got an active case of international corporate espionage happening right now." While Sarah coordinated with Andrew, Nicholas called the legal department and contacts at regulatory agencies. Richard's video call continued, unaware of the storm closing in. "So we're agreed?" Richard asked the Europeans. "Transfers tomorrow, delivery of information within 48 hours? Before anyone could respond, Kevin made his final move. Richard's screen began to flicker. "What is?" Richard tried to type, but his screen froze. Then, to his horror, a recording of everything he had said in the last 30 minutes started playing out loud. No. He tried to shut it down, but Kevin had taken full control. The European executives' windows began closing one by one, clearly in panic. Nicholas's phone rang. It was the head of security at Apex. "Mr. Sterling, we've just uncovered unauthorized activity from our servers. It seems one of our new consultants." "Richard Blackwood," Nicholas finished. "Yes, we know. And we have everything recorded." Within an hour, the story had exploded. Richard was arrested at his apartment, still trying to delete evidence. The European executives faced investigations in their own countries. Apex Corporation publicly cut ties with Richard, claiming they had no knowledge of his actions. Back at the office, Sarah, Nicholas, and Kevin watched the news, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You did it again," Nicholas said to Sarah. "You saved the company. You saved everything." "We did it," she corrected. "Teamwork, remember?" Kevin stood up, stretching. "Well, my job here is done. I'm going home before another crisis shows up." Left alone in the office, Nicholas turned to Sarah. "About earlier, at the restaurant." Nicholas. "No, let me say this." He stepped closer. "You risked everything to protect this company, to protect me. And it's not the first time. Sarah Thompson, you are the most incredible woman I've ever met." Before she could respond, Nicholas pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was a kiss full of promise, of possibility, of everything they hadn't said out loud. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. "This is a terrible idea," Sarah whispered, though she didn't step back. "Probably," Nicholas agreed, smiling. "But the best things in life usually are. Sarah, I want you by my side, not just as my assistant, as my partner in everything. Are you asking me out in the middle of an international corporate crisis? Is there a better time? We just took down a corporate villain together. It's practically a typical date for us." Sarah laughed, the sound echoing through the empty office. "You're crazy." "Crazy about you," he corrected. "So what do you say?" Sarah pretended to think. "Well, considering I'll probably keep saving your company on a regular basis, it might make sense to make this official. Is that a yes?" It's a let's see where this goes," she said, pulling him into another kiss. As the sun began to rise over Manhattan, casting golden light across the office, Sarah thought about how much her life had changed, from waitress to corporate hero, from invisible to indispensable. And now, girlfriend to the CEO. "What did I get myself into?" she murmured against Nicholas's lips. "The greatest adventure of your life," he answered. Sarah had to agree. 6 months had passed since that early morning when Sarah and Nicholas finally admitted how they felt. Sterling Enterprises was thriving, with Sarah officially promoted to Director of International Relations, a position created just for her unique skills. The company had never been better, and their relationship, despite a few early doubters, only made them stronger both personally and professionally. It was a regular Tuesday, or at least that's what everyone thought. The main conference room was full for the quarterly investor meeting. Sarah was presenting the results of the Asian expansion, which had exceeded every expectation. As you can see in the charts, she pointed to the screen, our growth in the Japanese market rose 47% this quarter. The partners we signed 6 months ago are... Sarah? Nicholas suddenly interrupted, standing up from his chair. She paused, confused. Nicholas never interrupted her during presentations. Yes? Sorry to interrupt, but there's something I need to do right now. The room went silent. Investors, executives, and staff exchanged puzzled looks. Andrew looked especially alarmed. Nicholas, we're in the middle of an investor presentation, Sarah whispered, trying to stay professional. I know. He walked over to her, and to everyone's absolute shock, got down on one knee. A soft gasp came from Patricia in the back of the room. Oh my God, Sarah murmured, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Nicholas pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Sarah Thompson, you came into my life serving wine and saving billions. You turned my cold corporate world into something vibrant and real. You taught me that success without joy is failure, that laughter is worth more than protocols, and that sometimes the best business decisions come from the heart. Tears began forming in Sarah's eyes. Around the room she could hear emotional sighs. You've saved my company more times than I can count, Nicholas went on. But more importantly, you saved me from myself, from a life of loneliness at the top. So in front of everyone who witnessed our unlikely journey. He opened the box, revealing a ring that sparkled under the room's lights. Sarah Thompson, will you marry me? For a moment, Sarah was speechless, rare enough that Kevin whispered, Mark the date to Thomas. You're proposing to me in the middle of a quarterly meeting? She finally managed to say. Seemed fitting, Nicholas replied, still on one knee. We met during a business meeting, and now we have plenty of witnesses, so you can't back out later. The room burst into laughter. Sarah looked around. She saw familiar faces, Patricia crying openly, Andrew smiling and shaking his head, Thomas clapping quietly, Kevin recording everything on his phone. Even Margaret Whitman, the stern advisor, looked moved. You know, Sarah said, turning back to Nicholas, normal people propose in fancy restaurants or on-set beaches. But we're not normal people, Nicholas replied. We're the ex-waitress turned corporate hero and the CEO who learned how to laugh. When you put it that way. Sarah reached out her hand. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Nicholas slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss as the room erupted in applause and cheers. That was insane, Sarah whispered against his lips. Would you expect anything less from me? He answered. The meeting, of course, was completely forgotten. The Japanese investors attending via video conference were delighted. Very romantic, one of them exclaimed. Better than a soap opera. 3 months later, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, it felt like destiny had come full circle. The wedding took place on the terrace of the same restaurant where it all began. The upscale place where Sarah had once served wine and saved her first billion-dollar deal. Giuseppe, from the Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, had been specially hired to oversee the menu. For Nicky and his Sarah, he declared to anyone who would listen. The manager who had once fired Sarah was there too, invited by her. No hard feelings, she said when she asked him. If you hadn't fired me, none of this would have happened. He spent the entire reception looking mildly nauseated and deeply regretful. Patricia was maid of honor, crying even before the ceremony started. You can't cry yet, Sarah protested as they got ready. You'll ruin your makeup. I can't help it. It's so beautiful. The waitress turned princess. Corporate princess? Sarah corrected. It's less Disney and more Wall Street Journal. The ceremony itself was the perfect blend of elegance and humor. When it came time for the vows, Nicholas surprised everyone. Sarah, I promise to always appreciate your creative translations, even when you use Google. I promise never to call you a mere assistant. I promise to laugh at your jokes, even the bad ones about coffee. Hey, my coffee jokes are great, Sarah protested, making everyone laugh. And I promise Nicholas continued, more serious now, to always remember that the best things in life are the ones we don't plan. Like you. Sarah wiped away a stubborn tear. Nicholas, I promise to keep saving your company on a regular basis. I promise to always say what I think, especially when you're being stubborn. I promise to make you laugh at least once a day. She paused, looking into his eyes. And I promise never to let you forget that an expensive suit isn't as impressive as a genuine heart. By the power vested in me, the officiant said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss that followed lasted long enough for Kevin to shout, "Get a room!" The reception was unforgettable. Andrew gave a hilarious speech about Sarah's first day. I thought Nicholas had lost his mind, hiring a waitress, but then she saved the Japan deal with Google Translate, and I thought, okay, maybe he knows what he's doing. Thomas talked about the meeting where Richard was exposed. Sarah made up a fake protocol on the spot. XK something. Richard fell for it completely. It was better than TV. Kevin showed a video of Sarah's greatest hits at Sterling Enterprises, featuring her funniest comebacks and the moments she left arrogant executives speechless. But the most touching moment came when Harold, the night security guard, approached Sarah during the party. Remember what I told you on your first day? He asked her. About playing the game, but never losing who you are. How could I forget? You did better than that, he said, emotional. You changed the whole game, and you taught all of us how to play better. The night went on with dancing, laughter, and plenty of Italian food, courtesy of Giuseppe. Sarah had changed out of her wedding dress into something simpler for dancing, but she kept the veil because it goes with sneakers, as she explained to a horrified Patricia. You know, Nicholas said as they danced under the stars, when I walked into that dinner almost a year ago, I never imagined it would end like this. Married to the waitress? Sarah teased. Married to the most amazing woman in the world, he corrected, who just happened to be a waitress. Was, and proudly, she said. By the way, I can still balance 3 plates on each arm. Very handy for family dinners. Nicholas laughed. I can't wait to see that. Near midnight, as the guests started saying their goodbyes, Sarah and Nicholas slipped away to the empty terrace. The city sparkled below them, full of possibilities. So, Mrs. Sterling, Nicholas said, pulling her close. Any regrets? Just one, Sarah replied. He frowned, concerned. What is it? Not asking for a raise before agreeing to marry the boss. Nicholas laughed, spinning her in his arms. I think we can work something out. Good, because I have a few ideas to improve our meetings, starting with real coffee. He silenced her with a kiss. And Sarah thought there was no place in the world she'd rather be. The former waitress who dared to sit at the table with the powerful. The CEO who learned that success means more when it's shared. Together, they proved that sometimes the best deals are the ones made with the heart. What did you think of Sarah and Nicholas's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.